When a baby is first born, its hearing is a lot more developed than its eyesight, and so its vision of the world is a little bit blurry, and the baby depends a lot more on hearing than sight. The mother is hard to understand for the baby. The baby will hear things, will hear the mom moving around, but cannot see the mother very well, and so the mother is a little bit mysterious in this way. The mother, as far as the baby is concerned, is omniscient and omnipotent. The baby doesn't even grasp object constancy. It believes that whenever an object leaves the field of view, it disappears. If a blanket is put on the baby's face, the baby lacks the coordination to remove it, and it will suffocate. So helpless and lacking in a view of the world the baby is that the quite unremarkable intelligence and abilities of the mom is godlike to the baby. For a baby to summon the powers of this mother, it will cry. It will cry so hard that I am just about always surprised at how much sound can come out of a baby. This is because that cry is the expression of the baby's entire worldview. The beginning, and as far as it knows, the end of the mother. The mother is the only entity that can keep the baby alive. To the baby, the success of its cry determines its survival, and because of this, understanding the mom is paramount. As far as the baby knows, the mother is eternal. The baby came into existence, and the mom was always there. The baby has no knowledge of the circumstances or time before the existence of mom. The mom also violates economics. The mother exists, it is all-powerful, yet has chosen to care for something as helpless as the baby. How merciful this mother must be. With all of her cosmic power to manipulate objects, to determine the location and activities of the baby, and move the baby around the world seemingly on nothing more than a whim, and the multidimensional understanding that objects don't disappear when removed from the field of view, this being chooses to care for something as helpless and pathetic as a baby. This may seem charming and humorous, but this is deadly serious. Yes, we have all cognitively outgrown babyhood, but the longing for a being infinitely more powerful than oneself, and a being that secures one life and comfort, is expressed in other ways. The parallels of this phase of development to religion, as I'm sure is not a surprise to most people watching this, are uncanny. You cry to mom, and you pray to God, and sometimes, cry out to God. Mom works in mysterious ways. A baby can piece some of the puzzle together, but the mother is still largely a mystery to the baby, and all the baby can do is cry and hope for the best. God also works in mysterious ways. Mom, to the baby, is practically omnipotent and omniscient. Whether or not she's actually omniscient is not that big a deal to the baby, because the baby is so pathetic in its knowledge and abilities that the mom is practically omnipotent and omniscient. God, of course, is omnipotent and omniscient as well. The mother is eternal. The mother has always existed. God has always existed. It is vital to understand the mother so as to ensure the survival. Understanding the mother is very vital to the infant. It is vital to understand God to ensure survival in this world and perhaps in an afterlife. Mom violates economics or reciprocity. God also violates economics or reciprocity. Why would God care about man, something so less than it? Why would mom care about something so much less than it, the baby? God could only care for you out of mercy and love in the same way that mom only cared for you out of mercy and love. Not only can we draw parallels, but the impact of parents on religious belief is clear as well. Violent parents tend to breed more violent gods, full of wrath, hellfire, and punishment, and all that stuff. More nurturing parents tend to breed more nurturing gods. And as parenting styles become more loving, so did the gods. The polytheistic gods, which demanded various sacrifices, the Aztec god that would demand the most beautiful virgin in the village to be sacrificed, these were all much more brutal gods. The God of the Old Testament was brutal as well, killing firstborns and demanding occasional sacrifices, but I guess you could say is an improvement over polytheism, if a minor one. But as parenting styles improved more and people became more sophisticated, the New Testament came into being, whose God is a bit more forgiving than the Old Testament. As psychotic as the threat of hell is, the New Testament God is an improvement. Toward the end of the Roman Empire, infanticide started to be frowned upon. It's often forgotten that in those days, unwanted babies were simply killed or just left in the wilderness. Jesus the Christ supposedly died for our sins, but Jesus reflected a transition from infanticide of unwanted children to the mere abandonment of them in the monasteries. He died so that children wouldn't have to. Whether or not Jesus, the person himself, actually did what is said about him is irrelevant. Jesus represented a transition from a barbaric to a less barbaric worldview, or psychoclass. And what we see in religion is religion being nothing more than a reflection of improvements in the family. Towards the end of the Roman Empire, it is said it became increasingly more violent. I believe that this is nonsense. I believe what happened was that people became more sensitized to the violence and more repelled by the spectacle of murder as sport and the annihilation of entire communities. Rome became no less noble than a mother becomes less noble as the baby reaches childhood and then adulthood. The religion as parent hypothesis also fits the deification of Mary. A simple systematic analysis of the Bible would suggest Mary was a rather unimportant figure. But because religion is a projection of the mother, more of the mother than of the father, the Catholic Church needed a goddess. And religion must have a goddess, and Mary filled this need. You had a whole bunch of people who dogmatically wanted to follow the Bible, didn't really approve of worshiping Mary. But Christianity is not the Bible. Christianity is an expression of early childhood, and so it needs a mom, it needs a goddess. The dirty little secret about statism is that a state is not powerful enough to do what it does. It requires the consent of the governed. Okay, look at how hard it is for governments to control places like Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, Somalia. Okay, these are external states with an external tax base pumping billions in an attempt to secure what are, quite frankly, rather unsubstantial countries. The fact that superpowers cannot control places like Afghanistan suggests that the origin of the state was not based on force, but on consent. But who in their right mind would consent to an arrangement as exploitative and inefficient as a state? The answer is nobody in their right mind would. People not in their right mind would, and did. The only way you can get people to agree to obey the law some self-proclaimed king just pulled out of his butt and pay taxes to this man and perhaps even fight in his army or builds his pyramids would be if you believed it was God's will. And so the first rulers were man-gods. Then as people became more sophisticated in ways, they became demigods. Then they were merely personally appointed by God. Then it was said that their rule was justified by certain passages in the Holy Scripture. And finally, the rule of the state was completely divorced from religion, technically, if not completely in fact, as we all know that religion still plays a big role in politics. The parallels between religion and the state are uncanny. You pray to God, you vote to government, and both have about the same effect. God works in mysterious ways, and of course government really works in mysterious ways. God is omnipotent and omniscient. Government is omnipotent in that it decides the law, and you can only challenge the government in its own court. Though the idea that government can regulate human interaction ascribes an intelligence to government significantly higher than God has always existed, government has always existed. It is vital to understand God. It is vital to understand government so as to secure its blessings and prevent its wrath. God violates economics and reciprocity. Government violates economics and reciprocity. Not only can we draw parallels, but the impact of parenting styles on political beliefs is also clear. Households with more corporal punishment tend to produce people with more violent political views, and political views tend to reflect parenting styles. When you had intrusive parenting styles around the world, you tended to have more intrusive economic systems, more intrusive political systems, such as mercantilist or fascistic political systems. As Britain and France were moving away from the intrusive mode of parenting into the socializing mode of parenting, they transitioned from a mercantilist economic system to more of a socialist economic system, where the government wasn't involved in actually deciding how things would be produced, not signing monopolies to companies such as like the Russian Trade Company or the East India Tea Company or like the Massachusetts Bay Company, like all these companies that they signed up where the government actually said, all right, you're going to go here and you're going to produce this much lumber, this much coal, this much tea, this many whales and stuff like this. As you moved away from the intrusive mode of parenting, you saw government moving into the socializing mode, or the socialist mode, where government simply incentivizes certain behavior. And as Britain and France were moving out of the intrusive mode of parenting and into the socializing mode of parenting, Germany lagged behind. And their government controlled economy was merely a reflection of highly controlling parents. Germany was still in the intrusive mode of parenting, and so they remained in the intrusive, aka mercantilist, aka fascist economic model. And of course, the prevalence of bondage porn in Germany and Japan are also reflections of their backward parenting styles. And the prevalence of group sex porn in Russia may reflect something else. And the pattern, I know, is not always perfect. I'm not putting forth a theory of everything with this video here. I'm not saying that absolutely everything is a reflection of infancy and early childhood, but I am saying that most of it is. Atheists are correct in identifying religion as a security blanket, but all too many of them cling to another security blanket, the state, even harder to make up for the loss of the God security blanket. They switch from mommy God to mommy government. And because government is what threatens me more, I have zero solidarity with people who make this switch. The state is a religious institution, and to remove God from the state means nothing, because it is this God fantasy that created the state in the first place. Here's how retarded the state is. We need a state because man is inherently corrupt and abusive. Thus, we need a state to keep men in check. This state is made up of men. In fact, the type of men that enter the state are typically of a lower caliber than those who don't. You could probably spend years breaking down the state, finding private alternatives to state, quote, services, close quote, that are cheaper across the board and have more access to the underclass than state services. Education, environmental protection, law. In fact, the first state law has always been a derivation of common law that had already existed. Police, defense, welfare. And for whatever objection one may have to non-state people doing these things, the alternative is always a group of people who are only marginally accountable to like either election or revolution, and whose budget is not determined by how well they serve the people. And in fact, failure to do their job may result in a budget increase. And certainly no government agency will ever go out of business for not satisfying the consumer. Having a government do something is every bit a non-answer as having God do it. There is no government, just a bunch of people who call themselves such, and many more who believe it. There is no God, just a bunch of people who call themselves churchmen, and many more who believe it. These archons are just fantasies. They are projections from a time when there actually was an archon. A time when you actually were helpless and saved by this goddess Amazon woman who, compared to you at the time, could practically move the world and see in the fourth dimension. That's why rational arguments with someone who believes in fairies or men who don't respond to incentives, aka a state, can only do so much. Yes, it's necessary to logically debunk God or government, but from there, the issue is not a logical one, but a psychological one. The state just provides a safety net. It provides the structure in which everything else can run smoothly and safely. It is the chamber in which the fluid flows. It is the safety box. It's this mental texture that's the problem. And this mental texture is simply the result of babyhood. If you're still watching this, I request you close your eyes. Imagine a world like today's, where people go to work and do all of that living stuff, except there's no government. People are just doing their thing, and it's just like today. The police are gone, yet there's no chaos. People are more interested in shopping and playing sports and playing video games and making YouTube videos. Do you see that world? You know, got that world in your mind? Okay. That's the world. That's the world we actually live in, except there are a bunch of religious nut jobs, excuse me, statist nut jobs running around calling themselves government. And these people seize a portion of your income and give it to others based on who the hell knows what, and the cops occasionally harass you for violating some law that you never agreed to. And every once in a while there will be a vote where people vote for what these religious statist fanatics will do next. Take away the scaffolding, the mental texture. Look at it for what it really is. The mental texture of the state as something solid, something real, concrete, a noun, is nothing more than an emotional throwback to infancy. The structure that the parent actually provided. It's a throwback to that which the state does not provide. Because the state is made of mere men, just like you. Not more, but probably less. It's as effective at solving problems as your class president would be. The state isn't even above you. It's a bunch of people in and amongst everyone else. The idea that the state is above you, and this idea in people's mind that the state is above you, and even I continue to struggle with this a little bit, is a throwback to when your mom actually was above you. And that's why all political ideology fails. And Obama will fail. What we're living in is about the same as having the Hare Krishnas running everything.